Hello and welcome. We here at WENY are highlighting the candidates of the New York 23rd congressional race. Joining me now is Republican incumbent Nick Langworthy. He's been the first-term congressman for the New York 23rd district. Congressman Langworthy, you just served your first term. Relatively, people still trying to get to know you over these past 2 years. Why don't you give the folks at home who don't necessarily know exactly who you are a little bit about yourself, what you've been doing, and what you are doing here in Congress?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to conduct this interview. I think it's important for the voters to hear directly from the candidates, and that's why we spend so much time crisscrossing the district. But I'm finishing my first term in the House of Representatives, and I'm seeking re-election because I think the American dream is slipping away from our next generations. The same opportunities that I've had, that my parents had and their parents had, they're not as clear for the next generations coming forward. So I think these conversations are very important. I'm a father of two. I have a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old son, and a 10-year-old daughter. My wife Erin and I live in Pendleton, New York, in Niagara County. This district is 9 counties now, very large. Prior to my service in Congress, I was the past chairman of the New York State Republican Committee, and before that, the Erie County Republican Committee, as well as I spent extensive time working in constituent services and district operations for 2 former members of Congress in the Buffalo area. Prior to that, I'm a graduate of Niagara University, and I grew up in the southern tier, but on the other end of the southern tier in the Jamestown area.
Yeah, and so you've served these past 2 years in a Republican majority Congress. You are a freshman congressman. I know a lot of people, sometimes they can thrive in that environment. Other people kind of talk about the struggles of being a freshman congressman. What has your feeling been like being in Congress, being a freshman congressman, being new to all of this? And just talk me through the last 2 years. What have you learned, and ultimately what's your proudest accomplishment?
Well, I feel that I've been very prepared to go to Congress. I mean, the past work experience I had, working for prior members of Congress, I certainly knew the processes, the need to, develop world-class constituent services throughout our district. That's something I came to the office with the knowledge of. And that's a very important part that is often overlooked is what do you do to serve the community that you represent? Not just casting votes in Washington, but what kind of team are you putting in place to take care of the people? And we're very proud that we've closed over 2,200 cases for taxpayers, throughout the southern tier in western New York, where they had problems with the federal government cutting through red tape, whether it was, the veterans benefits, the IRS, Social Security, Medicare. We like to have a little, motto in our office that no problem is too big and no problem is too small. When somebody calls and they need help, we have a team of people ready to go to help them. So I've put great emphasis on those district operations, but also going to Washington. I had some great relationships coming into the Congress, but I certainly have some political experience, but it's a very narrow majority. We're only in about a 4-seat majority right now. But I was very honored early on to be appointed as a member of the Rules Committee. And there's only 9 members of the majority party on the Rules Committee, so to be chosen as a freshman by then Speaker Kevin McCarthy to serve in that capacity was a great honor, but it also helped me really get up to speed very quickly about the committee processes, get to know each and every one of the committee chairs, as they're the ones that come and testify before that committee about the bills, because every bill that comes to the floor has to come through the Rules Committee first. So it's been an awesome responsibility. It's been a large time commitment, but I think paid off very well for my ability to get things done for our district. I also serve on the Agriculture Committee, which is so important, as we've been considering a farm bill that we can hopefully get across the finish line in the lame duck session. But with the agricultural interests across this district, which are great, huge dairies and dairy output. I mean, New York, trying to remind the rest of the country that New York is a dairy state sometimes is a bit of a lift, but we have massive amounts of dairy farms in this district. We also have a lot of specialty crops, whether it's maple or grapes, our wineries, our vineyards. I mean, we have the largest enclave of Concord grapes in the world in this district. Something I'm very proud to fight for. And then I'm also on the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, which is the investigatory arm of the Congress. And we've accomplished a lot there. We've gotten to the bottom of things. I mean, one of our most substantial hearings that I participated in was, questioning the head of the Secret Service following the Butler assassination attempt on President Trump. I mean, it was probably the worst testimony, I think, ever before a House committee. She stonewalled, and we called for her resignation following that, and the reality was she resigned the next day. So it's a very important, committee as we go to get to the bottom of the answers, particularly on what's happening in the Biden administration.
Yeah, let's switch to talking about this race now. The election in New York 23rd rated solid Republican by many election forecasters. Many pundits say you are very safe in your seat. So what has campaigning for you looked like this year that a lot of people think you don't necessarily have that big of a challenge to face?
I mean, I believe in showing up. And I think that I've demonstrated that throughout my time in Congress. People had, I think, a little concern. This was the first time that this part of the Southern Tier, Corning and Elmira, was represented by someone that wasn't from this end of the district. And I think I've dispelled any concerns that were there. As any chance I get, I travel throughout all the counties throughout our district. So, there's nowhere where I really haven't been during this term of office. I think that we've, been accessible at all times, and I haven't really transitioned into a raw campaigning. This is more just going out and doing the job, talking to the people, and addressing their concerns. I mean, whether it's agricultural interests or manufacturing. I mean, whatever we can do for workforce development. We travel across this district and talk to the people, and offering that accessibility, I think, is what representation's all about.
Yeah, are those the top concerns that you've been hearing from folks, agriculture and manufacturing?
Well, those are just two very vital parts of our economy throughout this district. The greatest concern in our district is the cost of living, and we have an affordability crisis in America. Our cost of living has gone up exponentially. It started with gas, then it was groceries, then it's housing and insurance, and really every element of your life as you go through it has all gone up substantially. I mean, really, Americans are on the hook for 30 to 35% higher cost of living under the Biden and Harris administration than we were in the previous administration. And it starts with government spending. We have got to put Washington on a diet, because we had multiple, this was in the term prior to me being elected to Congress in 22, but when Biden came to the White House, the House was in Democratic hands, and so was the Senate. And they passed multiple off-budget, multi-trillion-dollar packages that racked up a national debt faster than anyone's recollection. Even Larry Summers, who was Bill Clinton's chief economist, said this was going to create mass inflation, and it has. And people need relief. I mean, interest rates have had to rise in order to cool down the inflation. It's having limited effect, but the problem is, even if the rate of inflation slightly goes down, costs aren't going down. So, a trip to the grocery store for many families in our district is going on the credit card. And that's a dangerous place to be in our economy. I mean, I find that, the Biden and Harris administration likes to say that the economy is humming on their watch. But I recalled in our debate that we had a few weeks ago, asking my opponent if he's taken any trips to the grocery store and talked to the people in the aisles like I do every week to see if they think the economy's doing well. Because the middle class has been pinched worse than ever before. And the president promised he was going to grow the economy from the middle out when he took office.
Yeah, if you are elected to a second term, do you have any plans on what you might be willing to do to try and fix that affordability crisis?
We have got to get back in the energy business. And, the first thing that President Biden did when he took office is he shut down the Keystone Pipeline. That, energy is a speculative marketplace. When you declare we're closed for business, you are going to have rises in prices. We can be exporting American liquefied natural gas to the rest of the world. Instead, for some reason, President Biden has shut down our export of LNG. It's essentially us exporting freedom, because we're forcing some of our allies to purchase liquefied natural gas to heat their homes from Russia. Why would we do that? It defies logic when we have ample supply to supply the whole world right here from New York and or from America. But we have some right here in New York that our state government will not allow us to harness, that could create thousands of good paying jobs right here in the 23rd district. And I think that's one of the great crimes perpetuated on the people of this district is, we have a non-responsive government in Albany that has shut down the opportunity that Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia, so many of these other states have enjoyed. It's transformed their economies, and we have suffered.
Yeah, I want to switch to manufacturing now. Over the summer, we saw a key local manufacturing group, Hardinge, declare bankruptcy, and they were thinking about closing down a portion of their business. Ultimately, they got funding to keep that portion of their business open, but this is just kind of sign of the times. Over the past 40 years, a ton of manufacturing has left the New York 23rd district. Is there anything you're planning to do about this, or do you think the local economy just needs to change and adapt?
Well, no, we need to embrace manufacturing. First and foremost, we need Albany to get a better business climate for the state. We regulate too much, we tax too much. We're not competitive unless we bribe a lot of companies to come here. I mean, you look at Micron coming to Syracuse. I'm all for it. But it's $40 billion is the outlay. And the sad reality is we have to lay out all this money and all these incentives to get businesses to want to set up shop here. We're competing against states in I'll call them freer states of Florida and South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas. They're exploding in growth. They have businesses that start every single day. And, our small businesses, our manufacturers struggle. And they struggle because obviously they have higher burdens, our workmen's comp rates, our regulations, the litigious nature of New York State. That puts us behind the 8 ball. But we also have to resource a lot of the things that we manufacture. During the pandemic, we learned that supply chains matter. We can't be dependent on cheap goods from the Far East for everything. We have to make things here in this country, and I think that we have the manufacturing legacy here especially in the southern tier, that we can revitalize that. The one piece of legislation that I have in the base text of the Farm Bill is something called the Careers Act, and this is about workforce development in our rural areas. And it would expand an existing grants program exponentially to allow local educational facilities to work with local employers to create a curriculum and work together to create the jobs that we have right in our community right now. And the Hardinge situation, is a complicated one as they, enter bankruptcy as they're selling off to a different entity. But they resourced. They brought a lot of jobs back from the Far East. And as I toured that facility when I first took office, they were very proud of where they were going. So it's unfortunate to see them have a stutter step, but it seems as though the jobs will stay for now. And we've got to do everything we can to hold on for dear life to every manufacturing job in the southern tier to do that. I mean, New York has got to understand we're competing against other states, not just other countries.
Yeah, is there anything you can do in Congress to try and maybe incentivize manufacturers to come back to the southern tier? Or?
Well, to create specific tools, I mean, we look for resources, and workforce development is a big area of my emphasis. I've been extremely impressed with what I've seen at Corning Community, as well as JCC and the Olean campus, what they're doing to create employees. And then the P-Tech programs, which are in many of our high schools, harnessing the young minds that want to go into tech fields, I think is going to help us have the workforce. That's where we can compete against other areas. We've got an educational system that's second to none. And in having the predictable, dedicated, hardworking workforce available is what will separate us here in the Southern Tier from other regions of the state. And I've heard that from employers that are looking to bring their manufacturing from, say, Georgia back up to New York because they can't put up with, you know, the low-end educational system that they're dealing with.
All right, let's switch gear to veterans now. Over the summer, you held several Vietnam veteran pinning ceremonies. I had a veteran today talk to me saying how much just that meant to him to be honored in that way. Veteran affairs has been a key issue of yours. Talk about your efforts that you're trying to implement to serve this population.
The veterans pinning ceremonies were easily the most fulfilling thing I've done in public life. I mean, we did 4 mass events across the district, and we pinned over 700 Vietnam veterans. And then there were several hundred that couldn't come in person that we mailed their pins to. Even if it's in a small way, to right the wrong that those Vietnam veterans faced when they came home, it was very important to do that. And I'm just honored that I got to be a part of that and shake every one of those men and women's hands and place that pin on their chest. We have some issues with the VA right now, particularly at the Buffalo VA, you know, which regionally is our largest hospital, obviously with a facility in Bath. But, you know, we, over the summer, uncovered, it was brought to me by the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, that there was an issue in the community care department there. And that's the department that schedules someone for appointments outside of the VA itself. So, as they need perhaps oncology care, they'd go to Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo or ECMC or one of the other hospitals. There were unacceptable delays in place. And it ultimately is to people not doing their job, people not showing up to work and doing what they were supposed to do. And I've been extremely impressed, and I think this is a good element of bipartisanship that we've displayed here. I mean, I've worked with Congressman Kennedy in Buffalo. Undersecretary of Veterans Affairs has come to Buffalo. I've discussed this situation with him almost every single week since it came to light in August. And they couldn't be more forthcoming. They want to fix the problem. I think in this element, this is probably the strongest partnership I've had with the Biden administration so far, is we're trying to get to the bottom of it. You know, I called for an inquiry into this, and within 2 hours of me issuing that letter, the VA had relieved the hospital director and his chief of staff of duty. We took swift action. And I think we need to clean it up. We need to look across the VA system and make sure there are not other instances of this. And we actually this week partnered with Senator Gillibrand and Schumer, and myself and Congressman Kennedy issued a joint letter asking the GAO to look VA-wide at this and to see if there are any other instances of what happened in Buffalo, getting that cleaned up, but also, you know, doing our very best to make sure no veteran ever has to wait again.
Yeah, in our own reporting, WNY, we recently spoke to a veteran, a gentleman who served this country and now feels assigned by the VA, the Bath VA, the very organization that's meant to serve him. You touched on this a little bit, but what are you doing to reach out to that specific population itself beyond systemic controls? What can you say to the people being faced by this?
Well, we deal with veterans every day in our office. I mean, there's a great deal of veterans casework that we do, and we're always doing outreach to our various Veterans Affairs Department. By and large, the veterans population likes interacting with the VA. They feel that it's a great place for them to get everything under one roof. And, you know, I think it's important with this situation at the Buffalo Hospital to not vilify the entire VA system because there was an issue in the community care department. This was a scheduling office, in essence, that fell on its face and didn't do their job. And they had leadership that didn't hold them accountable. But there are great things and great outcomes every single day at our VA facilities, and I've toured all of them. And I think we've got great world-class professionals in the nursing department, and I know that, you know, the nurses would like to see some more staffing done there. You know, and and obviously that's something that, the labor crisis is real in every segment of medicine and healthcare right now, and they've got to move a little faster doing some of the hiring on nurses. But I think with any healthcare facility, you're going to have some dissatisfied customers. But I do find that our VA hospital has a lot of very satisfied patients that feel that they are getting great care. They like the fact that it's dedicated to them for their service, and we have to take it incredibly seriously. This is a commitment we made to these men and women when they wore the uniform. Some of their colleagues didn't come home, and we made the promise to take care of them when they came home. And we need to make sure that we are providing every possible resource that we can for our VA facilities, and I will continue to fight for those, as we go forward in Congress.
Yeah, and on the ballot this year in New York, Proposition 1, it's a constitutional amendment that essentially aims to codify abortion rights along with other protections based on race, gender, creed, sexual orientation, and more. You say you're pro-life. Mm-hmm. What's your take on this amendment?
I think this amendment's highly unnecessary and is so vaguely written that trial lawyers and many others are going to take great liberties with this. It's I know our sheriffs that I've talked to are very concerned about what this will mean to them in the jails, as you have a prisoner population that will like to exploit any possible angle that they can. I have a philosophy on constitutional amendments. I started a no, convinced me to yes. This is a solution to a problem that does not exist. New York does not have a mass discrimination problem. Abortion is legal till the 9th month in New York. There is no limitation on abortion here. In fact, our governor recruits people from other states to come here on New York taxpayer dime to get abortions. So this is an unnecessary amendment to our state constitution, and I'm going to vote no on it.
Yeah, switching gears to immigration now, we saw an influx of migrants last year here to the U.S. Many of them were bused here to New York. Several of our counties in our area, they quickly issued orders that ban migrants from being sent from New York City to here. And so far from our own reporting, we haven't seen any of them sent here to the southern tier. Border crossings down from last year as well. Is this still an issue in your mind?
This is a huge crisis.
To fix it?
This is this is the greatest failing of the Biden administration. You have 94 separate executive actions that dismantled our southern border. They've allowed 10 million people to come into this country. They rubber stamp paperwork saying they're asylum seekers. I've sat in the office with the U.S. Border Patrol, and I asked, these ladies and gentlemen, many of which have 20 or 30 years of experience in this field, of the population that we've seen come into the country, what percentage will be entitled to asylum when they get their court date? Now, that court date might be in 2026, 2027. That's how far out we are because of the 10 million. And they assure me that maybe 8 to 10% will actually be asylum ready. Everyone else has broken the law to come here, and they've lied about their need for asylum. This is simply on purpose. And it is a great crisis. In New York State taxpayers, even though I really want to salute our counties in the southern tier. Throughout my district in the southern tier, all of our counties issued states of emergency and shut down Governor Hochul's. I was deeply worried about this because it's obviously a lot cheaper to house people here than it would be in Manhattan. And the governor herself told me upwards of 50% of the hotel space in New York City at this point is full of migrants. This comes at a tremendous cost to New York City. For some reason, with a court case from the 70s, they have to pay the bill. I was deeply worried our district would be inundated. Our counties issuing those states of emergency shut that down. And she knew she could not turn to the southern tier as a place to ship these people. We had them shipped to Erie County, just outside of my district, and it was a disaster. Within a week, we had sexual assaults, rapes. Employees that were in place to care for these people were victims of crime. You've had a rise in petty crime. You've had a lot of things not reported, but we have when you take the migrant crisis and you couple it with our ridiculous criminal justice system in New York, the elimination of cash bail, the discovery reform, you have a recipe for disaster. I mean, we had an axe murder in Buffalo by someone that was here illegally. We had caught just in Endicott by the Buffalo ICE office a Peruvian murderer who was such a cold-blooded killer that he had tattooed on his body his 23 victims' faces and names. He hid in plain sight right here in upstate New York. And because of New York's laws for sanctuary status, federal officials could not track his car because it had New York plates, because the state prevents the federal government from accessing their database because of the green light law that gives driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. You had a murder just outside of Rochester in Irondequoit where the husband, wife, and a child, I think 2 and 4, were murdered in cold blood. This is where this crisis has come, right here to upstate New York. And it's cost our state taxpayers billions, and there's no end in sight. There's 10 million people here in the country that don't belong here. We have to get to the bottom of it. We have to get a census of it and figure out what our next steps are.
Yeah, so any policies that you're eyeing that could potentially fix this issue?
Well, one, we need to have a zero tolerance policy at the southern border. We need to shut it down. The Remain in Mexico policy needs to go immediately back into effect. 70% of the crisis goes away with Remain in Mexico. They have to keep them there. If they're going to be the point of entry, they have to hold on to them. Those that are entitled to asylum, I would welcome them with open arms. I mean, and you've seen our country, welcome a lot of refugees from the Ukraine, other war-torn countries, people that really their lives are in danger. Not just I want to make more money, so I should come to the United States. That is not something that you're entitled for asylum for. It's really when people are persecuted or their lives are in danger, that's when we welcome people with asylum. We need to shut down any loopholes in that system that have allowed people to rubber stamp paperwork when they know they're not entitled to it. So going back to the Remain in Mexico policy, that needs to go back in day one. Finishing the wall is very important, but we also have to eliminate the loopholes in the parole system. I mean, we need to end catch and release. I mean, that's what we've had in this administration, where they apprehend them, they encounter them, they have them fill out an app, like you're ordering a pizza. And that's how you self-report yourself here. I mean, this is nuts. We have thousands of people from the terrorist watch list that have come over our southern border. This isn't about Mexico. We have people from 160 plus nations in the world, a lot of them young fighting age men. This isn't all, families seeking, the left likes to portray this in a far different light. There are, thousands and thousands of fighting age young Chinese nationals that have come across this country. We have no idea why they're here. We don't know where they're going or what their intention is. So we have to shut the border down. I know President Trump, if elected, will do just that.
Yeah, and you've aligned yourself heavily to Trump and his policies over the course of this last term and the campaign. Besides closing the border down, what other hopes do you have for a second Trump administration if you were to win?
Well, I think one of the most important things we have is the entire tax code is up. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act that happened in President Trump's administration, that's set to expire in the I believe the first quarter of next year. That is something we have to get to work to reinstitute and make permanent, because any positivity that's happened in the last several years is because of that tax code that lowered our corporate tax rates, that repatriated a lot of income that was stashed overseas by companies, put more money in people's pocket. We need to do things like, reinstitute, strengthen the child tax credit. That's something I voted to do. But this tax fight that's coming in the year ahead, I mean, Kamala Harris is pretty clear. She's going to increase taxes. that will be the biggest wet blanket on a staggering economy that we have right now that you can imagine. I mean, you will plunge a country into a recession if we increase taxes, period. We need to grow this economy. We need to get out of this debt by the growth in income, in strengthening our systems of Social Security and Medicare. Going into recession would be deadly for those programs.
Yeah, what about Harris? You mentioned her. Are you willing to work with a Harris-Walz administration?
I'll work with anyone that wants to do right by my district. I haven't found much of that with the Biden administration. Their policies have hampered our ability to succeed here in this district. We work with the administration to get a disaster declaration, following Hurricane Debbie and the tropical storm that came through that flooded, parts of Steuben County. I work with Governor Hochul. I work with the Biden administration to get that disaster declaration, because that's what we're all here to fight for, the taxpayers. Obviously I have made my position very clear. I support President Trump. I hope he's elected president. But if for some reason that didn't happen, I would go to work the next day and work just as hard for this district as I have every day I've been in office under the Biden administration.
Yeah, a lot of folks that we have talked to have spoken about a lot of division in this country. The presidential race, basically a toss-up. Let's talk about your opponent, Tom Karl, your Democratic challenger. You've met him. Mm-hmm. What's one good thing you can say about him?
He seems like a very nice family man, and I'm grateful that he ran. And it's important to have. I take nothing for granted, and I have a deeply Republican seat, but I don't want the people of this community, the taxpayers across the district, to think that I take their vote or their confidence for granted. I want to earn it every day. That's why we had a televised debate. Was proud to stand there and go toe-to-toe with my opponent, and that's what it's all about. That's what our democracy is founded on. And voters have a choice here. I think Tom seems like a very well-intentioned guy, and he's got a beautiful family.
Yeah, last question for you, Congressman. Why should voters choose you to serve New York 23rd again?
I think I've developed a great deal of momentum for this district in the first term. We've been in a deeply divided House of Representatives as a very narrow majority. But we've been able to stop a lot of out-of-control spending from the Biden administration. We enacted the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which saves taxpayers over $2 trillion over the next decade. And that was because we had balance in government and were able to force the Biden administration and Senator Schumer to the table with Speaker McCarthy to negotiate a debt ceiling deal. And then we created a spending framework that actually bent the curve and got us on the right track to spend less money than we did the year before. Hasn't happened very often in our history. That was an important step forward. But I've worked this district, I've worked across it, and as I said at the outset of the interview, I feel like the American dream is slipping away from our future generations. I want to fight every day to continue to put policies in place that just promote common sense. And I think that's a lot of what's on the line in the presidential election. I mean, very simple principles, lifting up the dignity of a hard day's work for a hard day's paycheck. Obviously, I don't want to see boys playing girls' sports. I mean, these are common sense, policies. We also, have to grow our economy and keep our kids here in Western New York. The greatest export that we've had from Western New York and the Southern Tier are our young people. And you see it with the graduating classes. They shrink and they shrink and they shrink, and our population in this end of the state, keeps going down. And unfortunately, too many New Yorkers are faced with the question of, do I stay or do I go? I want to reverse that curse. I want to work for common sense policies with our state partners to turn that narrative around. We shouldn't just be losing people to, other states like Florida and Texas and Tennessee. We can do better. And I want to do my part every single day in the House of Representatives to get that done. All
right, Congressman Nick Langworthy, thank you very much for taking the time to being here. Election Day, November 5th. WNY's got you all covered for all the results of Congressman Nick Langworthy's race and a whole lot more.